Hi guys, it's Erik here from the Building My Freedom Business podcast. We have arrived at episode 13, and in episode 13 I'm talking to Jay Clouse from jayclouse.com. Jay Clouse is someone who does many things. He runs a podcast called Creative Elements, and recently I noticed that he's got over 1 million downloads on that podcast, and he's on episode, as I was talking to him, he was on episode 75. So he's done amazingly well there, and I'm going deep into asking, how did he do this? Jay is also a member of the SPI team, the Smart Passive Income team, who runs the SPI Pro community. And this is how him and I connected. So I truly hope you enjoy my interview with Jay. All right, I want to welcome my guest, Jay Clouse. And Jay Clouse, I know you from SPI Pro, where you are the community experience director. It's a whole mouthful, and I would love to learn. I would love to learn more about what that actually means. But also, you've got your freelancing school, you've got your podcast Elements with over 1 million downloads, and I want to take a deep dive into that because I think you got a lot to teach my audience, who are people who are just in the process of building their freedom business. And from what I understand, and I hope that you will tell us a little bit more about it, you already built 2 businesses as far as I could read, whereby you sold them and then you started to invest a little bit here and there. So before I'm going to ask you about your background, Jay, and if you want to learn more about Jay, it's jayclouse.com. Am I correct? That's the one?
Yep.
jayclouse.com. But before I'm going to ask you about your background, I'm sorry for what question can I ask Jay that might be slightly different? And Jay, if I would ask your fiance, because I also understand that next year you're going to get married. And I have to say to the listeners, when you come to, I arrived at one of your workshop pages or your courses, and at the bottom was a lovely picture of you and your fiance saying that everything that I earn here goes to the wedding. And I thought, man, that is just such a way to combine the personal life with your work. So I love that. But if I would ask your fiance, describe Jay to me, what do you think she would say?
She would probably say he's very sweet, but he works too much. Yeah, I think she would say that he's very handsome and that he's very loving, and he can do anything he sets his mind to. He should just do less.
Fantastic. That's a nice way of putting it. Thank you for that, Jay. Before I'm going to move forward where you are now in the businesses that you run right now, can you please give us a tiny bit of a background story of where did Jay come from? Have you always been an entrepreneur? Did you go straight from college or uni or wherever you went into into a business? Tell me a little bit of your background story.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, here in the US. My parents and really my entire extended family were educators, mostly high school teachers, some elementary school. Yeah. But my view of the world was you go to college, you get a degree, you get a job, you work that job for 30 to 35 years, and then you retire. And that's it. So the challenge in my mind going to college was, what is the job that I would do that I'd be willing to do for 30 to 35 years? And it sounded just crazy. Like the answer is nothing. But also, how is an 18-year-old supposed to know what they want to do with the rest of their life?
Exactly.
So I went into the undecided program at the Ohio State University. I had a great faculty advisor. She was just the best. She just told me straight up right away, just because you're in the undecided program doesn't mean the decision is going to get made for you. You have to explore things and try things. She said, what do you like to do? And I said, well, I like to write. She said, okay, maybe you should take an independent study with the student paper. So I did that. And I thought for a while that I was going to get into journalism because I was good at it. I liked writing. It was fun. I got access to things that I didn't feel like I could have access to. I got to cover the Ohio State football team as a freshman in college. And that's a job that people work their entire career to get to be able to do for any other news outlet, right?
Yeah.
But towards the end of that same year, I had the good fortune of making some friends with some guys who had started businesses in high school, and they got me involved with a pitch competition. And I watched 6 of my peers pitch businesses that were making money, and it just blew my mind. I was like, that's an option. I didn't realize there was an option to make my own path like this. I thought I had to choose a path, and I worked a job for 30 to 35 years. And from there, I was just hooked. I was like, this is the path for me. I'm going to figure out this entrepreneurship thing, which at the time was just a startup thing. I thought startups were so cool, so sexy. I thought that's going to be my life. And as the years have passed, my perspective on entrepreneurship has broadened past startups and then through to being a service-based entrepreneur to today being a digital creator. There's just a lot of ways that you can be an entrepreneur. And I'm constantly trying to build my own freedom business, Erik, because to me, freedom and flexibility is the name of the game.
So could you give me, I know you built, what was your first business that you built and that you sold on? Can you tell me a little bit about that? And also, coming from no background other than your friends, who started businesses, where did you start? How did you come up with the idea, and where did you go from there to develop that business, and how long did it take you to sell it?
So after that pitch competition, I got involved with the club that put it on. It was an entrepreneurship club at Ohio State called the Business Builders Club. Got really involved on the leadership team, eventually ran that company as president my senior year. Through that experience, I learned a lot more about startups, and I started organizing startup weekend events here in Columbus, Ohio. So I went really deep into the world of startups. And right out of college, I connected with a guy who is starting a company, and he needed a co-founder. And so that was my first thing I did out of college is we co-founded this company. It was a ticketing platform. It's called Tixers. It's a little bit like StubHub, but we did things differently. If you were selling tickets, instead of listing your ticket and waiting for a buyer, we bought the tickets from you in the form of site credit. And then you could use that credit towards other tickets. We went through an accelerator. We raised close to $500,000 in funding. And then we were acquired about a year and a half later.
Wow. So from the beginning, man, most people who start a business, their first business is sort of we'll try it. We're trying to figure out what we want to do. But for you, it really was almost like quite serious from the beginning. Like went through the accelerator and
that's just what I thought entrepreneurship was. I mean, at the time, it was like Uber was on the rise, Airbnb was on the rise, like startups were the thing. And so I thought that's what entrepreneurship had to be. I was like, well, tell me what, like I was looking for a company to join at that level where I could be a co-founder, have a seat at the table, build it from scratch. And the opportunity kind of walked in my door. And so I was like, this seems like the right thing to do.
I'm really curious, Jay. Lots of people start their own business because they can't stand the idea that they have to work for someone else. Was that part of your vision of being your own boss or running your own business as well?
Yeah, eventually. I actually, before I took that job, like helping to build that company, I thought I was going to go into management consulting. Because as much as I love startups, I also thought that I wanted to make money, and management consulting was the path out of business school to make money. So I did a lot of studying and a lot of preparation, a lot of interviewing with firms like Deloitte and McKinsey. And I didn't get an offer, didn't get a job offer. So I didn't even have the option. So I said, I guess, instead of taking like some job that I'm not excited about, I'm going to do this startup thing, even though it's going to pay me next to nothing, even though it's really risky. I don't know if it's going to work at all. I'm going to do that. Then through that experience, I started to build kind of an identity as an entrepreneur, and it became something where it was difficult for me to imagine taking a job from an identity perspective and having a job. But after we sold that company and I worked for the company that acquired us, I had to get out of there. I didn't have something else I wanted to start right away. And I wanted to learn from somebody, frankly. So I did take a job in product at a healthcare startup here in Columbus, worked there for about 11 months before deciding again, I'm not very employable. I'm going to go back out on my own.
All right. I mean, how old were you when you first sold that business?
Would have been 24.
24. Okay. So if you take me through your journey, at some point you ended up working or being offered a role, or tell me about the whole SPI Pro, the Smart Passive Income community.
Mhm.
How did you get involved there? Did you, I mean, I'm just curious about the process, how you got to end up being part of the team.
So I took the job at the healthcare startup. As I said, I worked there for about a year. I left. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but knew that I just had to be my own boss again. Started freelancing, but then also created a mastermind program called Unreal Collective. It was a 12-week program. I worked with 5 business owners at a time. We would meet every week for an hour for 12 weeks. After that program was over, and even through the program, I invited everybody into a Slack channel where they could communicate with me, with each other. And over a period of about 3.5 years, we built a nice little community there. Through that program, I also met Matt Gartland, the co-CEO of Smart Passive Income. He had a front row seat to see what that community was like in Unreal Collective. And he also knew that SPI was working on building their own community. So when that time came, he basically asked me if I would help them plan and execute the launch of their community programs. And then a few months after that, the launch went really well for SPI and our membership community, SPI Pro. A few months after that, he was like, what would it take to bring you on the team full time? And I said, I'm too busy. I can't. And he said, well, what if we acquired this community that you've built and kind of merge the two? And I said, that's interesting. And so that was how that came about.
That is so cool. I mean, that's, I don't know if it's like a dream coming true, but it sounds like a smooth journey going from, you know, you got this community that you're really invested in, and then there is this offer of someone or an organization that you could look up to, that you could be interested in, you know, to be part of that, and for that to come together. That's quite really, really exciting. So how long have you been involved? I saw you wanted to say something about what we were talking about before, but you remember what you wanted to say?
Well, to your question of how long have I been involved?
Yeah.
I started working with SPI in a basically consultant capacity in April of 2020, I want to say.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been on the team full time since the acquisition, which was in January of 2021.
Right. And what I understand, I mean, does it feel to you that within the organization you are quite almost like a mini entrepreneur yourself? Is that, am I right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's true of most of the people that we employ, actually. But everything under the community experience umbrella, which is an entire division within the company now that I lead, all that's new since, you know, if not this year, middle of last year. So it's very entrepreneurial because we've created an entire business line, several actually within the company. We've got SPI Pro, the paid membership community. We also have our cohort-based courses, which we call boot camps, which is a community program that we manage. We're doing a big free virtual summit called Audience Driven here in the fall. That's under the community team. So yeah, we're doing a lot, and we're building a lot for the first time.
That's really, really good. If someone would ask you and say, Jay, out of all the things that you are involved right now, what is it that you are most passionate about? You know, and I know it's a difficult one to answer because you're probably passionate about everything that you do, but there must be one thing that, you know, that you really feel it inside here, that is where your mind goes straight away when you wake up, or, you know, what are you passionate about?
I mean, it would be my own business for sure, which doesn't really have a name. Like, it has an LLC name, but my own business is all linked to my writing, my podcasts, the freelancing school platform. Basically, I've got my own digital creator business that is supported through affiliate revenue, royalties, course sales, workshop sales, podcast sponsorship. That's where I get the most energy, is creating content under my own umbrella, whether it's writing. I write a weekly newsletter called Creative Companion, or my podcast called Creative Elements. Both of those are on a weekly basis. I have the most fun doing those two things.
Yeah, lots of your stuff. I mean, I can picture people who are building their business. I mean, the courses that you run are really good for them. But lots of people nowadays start a podcast or a YouTube channel. And you started your podcast Elements. How long ago? How long ago did you start that podcast?
March of 2020.
March of 2020. So right at this, well, here in the UK, when COVID was about, to start. Okay. So
yeah, no, it was like right at the beginning of lockdown.
I know. And I'm wondering if that is the reason, I mean, if that has contributed towards the growth that you have experienced. When I look at your website, well, I'm going to ask you about that, because I saw the graphics on your website about your growth, and suddenly it went from 20,000 to, well, a lot higher. So as a beginning podcaster here, I really want to find the golden nuggets that are hidden within you regarding how did you manage to do that? I mean, first of all, tell me, what is Elements about? Who is Elements for? But then please tell me a little bit about your journey of how did you manage that growth over that year?
On Creative Elements, I talk to high-profile creators about how they made a living from their art and creativity. Instead of asking Seth Godin about marketing, I asked him, tell me about the business of Seth Godin. Like, how did you get to do this full time? It's for other artists and creatives and aspiring digital creators. We have about 75 episodes out now. You can search Creative Elements in this podcast player to check it out.
Yeah.
The growth really came from getting featured in different podcast listening apps, which is one part relationships on the part of the network that I'm a part of, and one part luck, frankly, that they gave it a shot and they cared enough to feature it. Podcast discovery is really, really challenging. Word of mouth still kind of reigns supreme, but word of mouth is really slow. And just mathematically, it's going to be a slow build. Let's say that 2% of your listeners care enough about the show that they will literally tell somebody about it. Okay. If you have 100 subscribers, that's 2 people. How noisy are 2 people going to be? How many listeners are they going to get you? That ratio will stay intact. So when you get to 1,000 subscribers, now you might have 20 people.
Yeah.
And that's great. And it's a compounding numbers game from there. But when you start at 0, that's a really slow build. So I'm lucky that I got featured in some of these podcast listening apps. That was a huge part of it. And still is a big part of the strategy. Like, anytime that we can tap back into those relationships, I hope that the network does. It's a lot of, like, all these players have editorial teams essentially that decide what gets featured, and it's high competition. You look at Apple's new and noteworthy, it's a lot more noteworthy than it is new. Like, they were showcasing Masters of Scale last week. Like, that's not new at all. But so it's tough to get in there, but that's really where we found the most play. And now, literally now this month, I feel like I'm seeing more signals from general listenership in the marketplace that they're listening and loving it than I ever have before. I see people sharing it on Twitter, talking about on Twitter, creating threads to talk about what they're learning from the episode. And it's just so exciting to see word of mouth really happening in the wild.
I was listening today to an interview between Shane Sams from the Flip Lifestyle. He was interviewing Mixergy. What's
Andrew.
his name? Andrew Warner. Yeah. And they were talking about some of the big guests that they had, that they in the beginning, they were expecting that they were going to be the ones that were driving the audience. But they discovered that for some reason, that was not the case. It was the unknown person that brought a story that people could relate with. Is that something that you recognized in your journey there?
In some ways, for sure. I mean, the biggest takeaway is no one's going to bring their giant audience to your show, because then they would have to do that for every show they go on, and that's a lot of shows. So even if you get a big name guest, it's good for you. You can point to it and you can make a great episode out of it, but you're not really going to get the benefit of their audience unless their audience is just so voraciously looking for content from that person that they're searching that person, and eventually they get to your episode with them. But Where I find the most magic is people who are more so on the cusp, where they don't have that big name yet. They have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, but their stuff is really good. And the people who do follow them are really excited about that person. So that person's more incentivized to actually share the episode, and their people are interested in sharing it and listening to it too.
Yeah. Have you got a tip, Jay, for people? I mean, you've got quite some big names that you've interviewed. Seth Godin, I mean, is definitely someone that most people have heard of. I know that you are part of a network and you know people, but have you got any tip that a simple guy like me could implement or use to maybe get someone as a guest who is more well-known? How does that work?
For sure. Almost all of my podcast guests, I've cold emailed. Literally just sent an email and said, would you do this? Almost all of them. Now, it helped that my first episode was Seth Godin. My second episode was James Clear, because now people look at my guest list and they say, oh, people like me do this. And that perpetuates, right?
Yeah.
With Seth, I had already had like some email correspondence with him. I had purchased his podcasting course, and I had created a podcast out of that course, a different show, but it had some success. It got some it got some PR, and he featured that show on his sales page as a success story. So I followed up on that same thread and I said, I'm starting a new show. You would be a great guest. Will you do it? Also, a little known fact, he and I share a birthday. I don't know if he knows that. I don't think I brought it up. Then James is actually a friend of mine. Before James wrote the book and it published and his life went stratospheric, we would meet a couple times a year here in Columbus. He lives in Columbus. So that was more of a personal favor. I was able to go interview him in his home. It was a great time. And so the lesson there is, if you do have a favor you could call in or a string you can pull, do it early, get a big name early, because that's going to help self-perpetuate. And there's no shame in calling in that favor. It helps to have social proof when you reach out to these people, because now in those cold emails, I'm able to say, I've talked to these guests. I have this many downloads. I've been featured on these podcast apps. There's a lot of social proof there.
Yeah.
In the email itself, I am very short and direct. I have a view that you should be able to read the whole email in one swipe of your thumb on a mobile screen. So I start with like a personal reason why I'm reaching out, something that's like very clear that I did not just copy and paste this initial email. It's very personalized to them.
Yeah.
Then I say, I think you'd be a great guest on Creative Elements. Would you be open to a remote 60-minute interview for the show? And then I give a pitch of the show. I give that social proof, and I say, no pressure or obligation, but if you have time in the coming months, I say months, that's important, because you need to give these people a big window of time so they don't feel pressured and anxious about their schedule. Do you have time in the coming months for this interview? Thanks for the consideration. If so, respond, and I'll, send me my scheduling link. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I as well as being a member of SPI Pro, I'm also in an intensive coaching group with James Remco from Superfast Business. And he set me a challenge when I first announced that I'm going to launch this podcast. He said, as soon as you have your first 10 episodes up, I will come on board and I will do an episode. And my personality, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because my personality is that I have something inside of me that I don't like the idea of using other people. I understand. I mean, I can interview him, but I think, can I use his name, to while I contact other people, and can I announce that I am in his coaching group, so that there is some credibility there. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, to use other people's names to further your course?
I think yes, you can. Yes, you should. Obviously, honor that person. Don't say anything that's inaccurate or non-factual. But if I'm James Schramko and I go on your show and I'm guest 11, I want your show to grow in popularity. And if I can help in that, please, let me do so by being a guest, but also by using my name. I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely do it. Do it in a way that honors the person. You know, I think it's totally valid, and I do it frequently. And I think you have to, you know, like at some point you can't let pride get in the way of what you're trying to do, because you're just not going to be able to do it. It's a difficult world out there to compete and get your things seen and heard. You got to take whatever advantage that you can.
Yeah. I have a question about, do you ever receive personal little video messages of people who kind of want to be slightly different, and they just want to send you a personal message about getting you on their podcast, or for them to be on your podcast?
Rarely. It would be really effective if I did.
Hmm.
Be really effective if I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that type of thing always stands out in outreach because it's personalized. If you send a video and it's one that like you filmed in such a way that it's ambiguous, and I know you can send that same video to 30 people, that's not going to work. But if it's specific and personal to me, that would definitely be effective.
Perfect. It is definitely one of my things that I want to do, to get a few people on board who have a bigger name, because that is what you need to grow. Can you put yourself in the shoes of someone who is in the midst of building their business and hitting a plateau? You know, as a business, you can grow and then suddenly you hit that plateau. Maybe you can share something that you have done that has been successful regarding lead generation, regarding selling your courses, because you've got lots and lots of courses. So what is it that you do to attract your customers to your course? I mean, do you do webinars? Do you do advertising on your podcast? I mean, what drives your traffic to you?
Well, just because I have lots of courses doesn't mean I have lots of sales.
No.
I have a fair amount of sales, but you know, it's not crazy. I would say the goal is consistent incremental progress, and it's not going to be visible all the time. It's not going to be sexy, but like I do stuff all the time where I'm just making a tiny tweak to a landing page or to an opt-in form, or I'm finding another place to put an opt-in form, because you might have one new email subscriber a day right now. If you get that up to 5 email subscribers a day, that's a huge difference. And then you'll suddenly be at 10, and then you'll be at 20. And right now, I just went from like an average of 20 to 30 a day. I'm getting closer to 50 a day because I had a new effort where I made a free challenge, and you opt in via email and you're off to the races. And so that has gotten a lot of great traffic. It's very organic. The people who are in the challenge tell other people about it. So it's just like, what are the little things that you can do to just get a little bit more effective, a little bit more efficient every day? Because behind the scenes, I've built in sequences and ways where if you get into the system, now you're going to get introduced to a workshop. And if you get this workshop, you're going to get introduced to the follow-up workshop. And if you like that, you know, now you may be ready to invest in a course, something that's a little bit more high value. Excuse me. So it's just like a little bit at a time.
Yeah. So, but can you give me one sort of an idea of in other ways that you drive people to you? I mean, have you got specific? I mean, I assume the podcast drives people to you. Your work within the community of SPI Pro, people get to know you, drives people to you. Are you someone who does webinars? Are you someone who got like evergreen products, and you got systems worked out around that?
I don't do webinars. I just try to create a good article once a week. I try to create a good podcast once a week. And then I try to talk about both of those things on social media in between those times. I do love to do things like this where I go on other people's shows, because if somebody else has done a lot of hard work in aggregating a group of people who are going to be closely aligned to what I talk about, that's a great place to be discovered. So I love doing stuff like this when the opportunity arises. Sometimes it's organic, sometimes I seek it out. Those have been big helps to my overall audience size. And again, like the numbers I played out earlier, if you have 2% of people who will tell other people about your work, the more you get people in the top of the funnel, like that's going to play in your favor. And there's something to be said about just like escape velocity. Like there is a place that you can get to where things really start to take care of themselves. And I don't think I'm quite there yet, but velocity picks up a little bit every day. I can see that it's going to happen. And there's a lot of patience and resilience that's necessary to just say, you know what, this article that I'm writing right now, it's taking a lot of time. It's frustrating. It's hard. It's not going to have a huge payoff tomorrow when it's published, but it's part of the process. And I got to show up and I got to do it.
I'm still thinking about your figures. I mean, the over 1 million downloads, and as far as I understand, it's 75 episodes. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, I think it's about 75.
I mean, my head just goes like, you know.
Well, I mean, it's a similar thing where, like, if I have 10,000 subscribers, now every episode I publish, there's 10,000 downloads right there. That's 40,000 downloads a month, maybe even 50,000. If I get an extra 1,000 subscribers, now that's increased a lot too. So like it increments quickly.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate you because I think it's, I mean, it clearly shows that I think the one word that you said is sticking with me is consistency, is to being consistent in what you do. You know, we're coming close to sort of the end, but what I would love to know, when you are not running around running all your businesses and doing your job and everything, what is it that you do, Jay, to unwind, to recharge your battery? If you recharge your battery.
I gotta say, it's been a long stretch of not doing that, and that's something not enough people talk about. Like, whatever success that I found, which pales in comparison to a lot of people that I look up to,
yeah,
it's come from working my butt off. And I'm not here to like hustle culture you and shame you into saying you need to work all the time. I'm here to say that, for better or for worse, I've been doing a lot of that. And sometimes I don't know how to avoid it. It's not even that I want to. It's like I built this machine and I have to now. I feel like I'm paying my dues in that way. When I do have time to unwind, like I really want to spend time with my fiance. And I love watching TV and movies. Right. I love it. And it's not just like a total shutdown thing. Being the host of a podcast and having produced a documentary now too in the past, I can watch things through the lens of a producer and see the decisions somebody is making and how they craft the thing and how they tell the story. And I learn from that. And I'm also just like deeply entertained, and I just enjoy it a lot.
Yeah. All right. A question that I ask every guest, because I find it a lovely question. I mean, what is your bigger why in life? And with that, I mean, why is Jay on planet Earth with everything that you do?
Man, great confronting question. I don't have an answer for you, Erik. I can tell you that personally, like, I want to enjoy my time here, and I want to feel like the choices I made for me and the people that I love, and that I didn't compromise and live a life that wasn't what I wanted because I was afraid of trying to do the things that I wanted to do. And I hope I can teach that to my kids too.
Yeah.
I think building a freedom business gives you the opportunity to be a more present father, parent, and hopefully, you know, that ripple effect goes down generations.
And you know, the word freedom business, Jay, is sometimes a loaded word because people think, oh man, he's sitting on the beach with his laptop. But for me, my freedom business started, or the aim for it started in 2010, when my oldest son, at that time he was 8 years old, he was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. And at the age of 8, we took him out of the education system and we found a particular program that we wanted to do at home, and I needed to be there. And that is where I looked at what is my skill set? What can I do? And I started my training and coaching company, training social workers and family support practitioners in a particular way of coaching people. That was my initial start of freedom. And, you know, we're now 11 years later, and that is still part of it. But now I live in the UK and I'm a Dutch person. My parents live in the Netherlands. They're old. I want to be free to go over there and look after them and support them. So we all have our own different reasons why we want a freedom business. Absolutely. Jay, I appreciate your time, and I feel I've just started talking to you, and there are so many paths I would love to go down to, but I would like you to please, as you do so many things, where would you like to direct people to if they want to learn more about everything that you do, podcast-wise, course-wise? Give me that information, please.
You're listening to a podcast, so I'd love for you to listen to my podcast. It's Creative Elements. You can find it. I hope you like it. You can start with episode 1. I'm just as proud of episode 1 as I am of episode 75. If you want to learn more or read my newsletter, just go to jayclouse.com.
jayclouse.com. I'll put everything in the show notes. And Jay, you inspired me. I've only started my podcast on August the 17th, 2021. And I only recently celebrated my first 100 downloads. And I thought, yay, that's 100 people that have not listened to me before, and put them in a room. It's quite a lot of people.
So
but,
great.
Absolutely. So I'm going to keep following you, Jay, and I will run into you in the SPI Pro community. And if anyone wants to know how to become a member of the SPI Pro community, look in the show notes, because there is a link, which is my personal affiliate link, whereby you can register to apply to become a member. Jay, bless you, mate, and I'll see you in the community. Take care.
Thanks, Erik.